Sit down.
Hey, welcome back for another month of Toy Talk. And I want to talk to you this month about how transforming your mind can and will help to transform your life. Now, we've talked before on the show about paradigms, and we've talked about how the things that we've heard, especially in our early developmental years, can get into our mind and they help kind of train our subconscious to think in a certain way. And our body responds to this, our life responds to this. So if we were brought up in an environment that was always speaking negative about money, say, if they were always saying like, you know, we can't afford that, we'll never afford that, then your brain starts to think and to develop the thoughts that I can never afford that. And on the same end, if it's something positive, whatever it is that's getting put into your brain has a tendency to just kind of set in and set a paradigm for you. And your life tends to mimic your thoughts. What I want to tell you though is you can change that. You can transform your mind, but it is going to take work. Now, what I want to do is take just a minute and I want everyone to just kind of close your eyes for a minute. And this is what I want you to do. Do not think about a purple giraffe. No purple giraffes. Think about anything else, but do not think about a purple giraffe. No matter what you do, don't think of a purple giraffe. You can think about anything else in the world, but do not think about a purple giraffe. Now, open your eyes. And what were you thinking about for the last 30 seconds? A purple giraffe. And the reason is because our mind does not respond to no or do not. Our mind responds to the thoughts that are being placed into it. And when you're being told to think about a purple giraffe or whatever it is, or not to think about it, it still sets in your mind and your thoughts go toward that. And eventually that comes into your life. Now, we talked about before how a good way to see this is that when a baby is born, it will always end up speaking the language of its parents. It's never gonna, if a parent speaks English, your baby's not gonna start speaking Spanish. What happens is they get these words set into their subconscious and then eventually they come out. Now, what we didn't talk about is that it takes about 6 months for a baby to speak its first words and about 18 months to 24 months, about 2 years, before it starts stringing 4-word sentences together. And this is working with a blank slate. Now you, I, whoever's watching, you've got what, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of pre-programmed thoughts in your mind. So you have to really put some work in to change the way you think. If you're in a negative environment, if you're in a situation where you're hearing negative thoughts, you've got to change what you think about before you can ever transform your life. One of the things I collect that I haven't talked about much on Toy Talk, it's been mentioned once or twice, is that I collect novelizations of movies, books about movies. And recently I was reading the story of Back to the Future. Now, most of the people that watch the show have seen this movie before, or at least familiar with it. And you know the story, there's Marty McFly, he gets accidentally sent back to the 1950s and he's trying to make his way back to the future, back to 1985. And if you've seen the movie, you're familiar with the character of George McFly, who is Marty's father. And George is this kind of nerdy guy. He lets everyone kind of push him around and walk all over him. And at the beginning of the movie, we see that Biff Tannen, his biggest antagonist, has just come in, smashed up George's car, and he's blaming it on him.
Can I assume that your insurance is going to pay for the damage?
Well, my insurance? It's your car. Your insurance should pay for it. I want to know who's going to pay for this. I spilled beer all over when that car smashed into me. Who's going to pay my cleaning bill?
And George just kind of lets him walk all over him. And as Marty travels back to the past, or travels to the past, he finds that his father was the same way. And he sees his father being picked on by the other kids, being put down. He's just always let people walk all over him. One of the things I love about these books, why I love to read them, is you always get a slightly different perspective, some things that are a little different in the book than what you get in the movie. And the thing that we get very different in my eyes in the book is that we meet George McFly's father in the book. And we learn that George had a lot of hopes and dreams. He wanted to go to college, he wanted to be a writer, but when he would talk to his father about going to college, his father would tell him, you know, college isn't for guys like us. It isn't for you. It's for smart people. Do you realize how slim the chances are that you would ever get into college? You might as well just get a job out of school and just lead your life that way. And it's easy to see why George had developed such a negative mindset. Between students picking on him and giving him a hard time. But then Marty shows up. And he starts trying to build George up. He's trying to convince him to take Lorraine, the popular girl, out on a date because his future depends on it. But along the way, George starts to get built up a little bit. And in the book we see where Marty actually teaches George how to fight. We do see in the movie he eventually knocks out Biff. And this is a big factor in helping boost his self-esteem, helping him to transform his mind. But it wasn't enough, because we still see a few minutes later as he's dancing with Lorraine at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, that he lets another boy cut in. And at first he just kind of allows that. He does go in and stop it eventually. But the other thing that was going on is all the other students coming up to George and telling him what a great job he did standing up to Biff, telling him, George, you ever think about running for student body president? And in the book, George, we could really use a guy like you on the team. And all this didn't end that night, you can be guaranteed. It carried on. And as he heard these positive things being said to him, it changed his mind. It transformed the way that George thought. And as we get back to 1985, you find out we see that things have changed. He's got a great job. He's just had his first book published. And in the book, we learn that George did go to college and he'd been selling stories ever since he'd gotten out. His life completely transformed because his mind was transformed by what was being placed in it by those around him. Obviously, people watching this right now that have seen Toy Talk before have probably already figured out that we're going to be talking about Transformers this month. And yes, we are. And, Transformers has a motto. It's more than meets the eye, that more than meets the eye. And, it's a great motto, but it really goes along well with what I'm saying today. We might see somebody and, they might be struggling through life. They might be homeless. They might be addicted to drugs, whatever it is. But I'm here to tell you there is more than meets the eye. You get these things in your brain, but you can transform it. You can get around positive situations. You can change what's being put into your brain, and you can change your life. We have a tendency to think we can only go so high, but that's not true. There are no limits where we can go unless we limit our thinking. So I just want to encourage you, change the way you think. If you're in negative situations, change it. We've talked before using, there's things you can do on YouTube, the subliminal messaging, the books we read, the shows we watch, whatever it may be. Do what you can to transform your mind, and you can transform your life. We're going to go to commercial, and we'll be back right after these messages.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious
Transformers, more than meets the eye. Autobots wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons. The Transformers, more than meets the eye. The Transformers, robots in disguise.
It's the Decepticon communicators! Get more Autobots!
The Transformers, more than meets the eye.
Transformers from Hasbro.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Now, we've talked before about the Mego Corporation here on Toy Talk, and we've had some toys from that. We're going to take a look at another one from that toy line in just a few minutes, but I want to talk a little bit about that. Mego is a toy company that started in 1952 as dime store toys, for what we would see as like Dollar Tree nowadays. And eventually, in the 1970s, they started putting out action figure lines, action figures. They started with they got the world's greatest superheroes line, which was all of DC and Marvel, that everyone from Captain America to Superman. And beyond that, they started putting out action figures for TV shows, for movies, and everything from Planet of the Apes to Happy Days. And Mego just soared in popularity throughout the 1970s. Now, in 1978, the company started going into a little bit of a different direction. They started getting into electronic toys. And we're going to take a look at one of those right now. This is the Mego 2XL. Some people are familiar with 2XL. And it's actually written as the number 2XL, but it was supposed to be to help children excel, 2XL. And this was their first move into educational toys. And what 2XL would do is you inserted a tape into him, and he would ask you questions, He was considered very innovative because he would interact with the children. This was in 1978 that it came out, and it ran until 1981, so it was really a pioneer toy at the time, and it won tons of awards because of this. Educators loved it. It just was incredibly popular. So you would pop the tape in, he would interact with the children, he would tell jokes, they would laugh. It was the first interactive robot type toy that Mego ever put out. And we said this month that we're talking about Transformers, and we're going to do that with our guest in just a few minutes. But what I wanted to show you is that you can take a toy and transform it into something different. Some toys are made to do a certain thing, like this was made to ask questions, and the kids would answer by pushing whether it was A, B, C, or D for the answer. But what I have done is, since the Mego 2XL worked on 8 tracks, I took this and I have transformed it into my personal 8-track player. So we're going to go ahead and show you a little bit of how it works here. Go ahead and insert in Saturday Night Fever, man, some Bee Gees. Simple as that. Turn them on. We'll start on program 1. And man, and there you go. Got some Bee Gees going. And this is one of the ways that you can take a toy and transform it into something else. So think sometimes out of the box. 2XL was a great toy. But personally, I think he's a better 8-track player. I enjoy him. We'll be back with our guest in just a minute. This month's guest kind of came in a roundabout way. I contacted a friend of mine about possibly being on the show. She was busy and said, you got to talk to my friend Eric. He does Comic-Cons. And Eric said, all right, maybe at some point, but you need to talk to my friend Andrew. He is a huge toy guy. And so I met Andrew Lovuolo. And welcome to Toy Talk, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, man.
Absolutely. Now, I met you actually out at a comic book signing. Yep. And you were signing autographs. You're actually a comic book author,
yep.
Writer.
I wanted to be an artist. I went to school for art. I did art most of my life. But I
did see you drawing some caricature type stuff of people out at the show.
I do get asked at shows. That's usually when I draw the most. But
yes.
I just never had the confidence, doing it. I mean, I'll do it enough, and people do enjoy what I do, which is warming and everything, but heartwarming. But I kicked back to writing because it was quicker to turn around and also to manage the business side of the publishing. So that was why I kind of kicked back to writing, because I could turn out pages more and keep more track of that, while I also had artists that were definitely better skilled than I am.
I know you have a series called The Rift, and just since we're talking about the artists, I know that this particular issue 5 was the same artist you said that have done the Harley Quinn books. Yeah, just on the cover, Jimmy Palmiotti did the inks when he was still inking before he actually became a big writer for DC, and also his own things too, paper films. But his now wife, that was his girlfriend at the time, maybe Amanda Connor, is the artist of Harley Quinn. She also did Starfire with him, I believe, too, right? Okay, excellent. Yeah. Okay, and there's 5 issues so far, and the book is called The Rift, the R-I-F-T. Tell us a little bit about the story.
The story's kind of a big story, but it's basically these characters that I created that are on the cover of issue 1. There's some alien creatures that I thought was the next step. Starting with Frankenstein, the werewolf, the mummy back in the day. Okay. Then we, growing up, we had Freddy Krueger and Jason and that stuff to kind of scare us. What would be the next level of creatures that you wouldn't want to bump into in the night? Okay. And then they rule over what we know as werewolves, vampires, and witches. There's a different twist on that, and then the humans that get caught up in the mix between the two tribes. Sure. And it takes place in and around Boston, so. Okay, so it's local. Yeah. Excellent. And so while we were out at the comic book show, though, one of the other guys there had said, I had already been told you had a great toy collection. One of the guys was like, oh, it's just out of control. He's got a toy museum in his house. Tell us a little bit about how did you get started collecting toys to begin with? Just being a kid like most of us, and doing that as a kid and saying, "Mom, I want that." When you see it on TV, I want that. We were just talking beforehand, and you were telling the story about how you ended up opening a present one year beforehand. Tell us a little bit about that. Was this guy, not exactly this guy, but the original, the OG Optimus Prime, came out in the '80s, and my friend and I, we couldn't wait, so we kind of snuck under the tree, took it across the street where he lived. You knew what it was ahead of time. She opened it. Yep, shake the box, take a little peek inside, and we had fun with it, but we were foolish enough to put stickers on it. Oh, so you got busted. Yeah. And try to wrap it up ourselves, which, at our age, whatever that was, 7 or 8 years old, we didn't have the skill sets.
Excellent. And we are going to talk about Transformers. I mean, and when we were out again at the comic book show, we were talking about, what could we talk about? And you have toys from everything. I've seen Batman, Star Trek. I mean, just name it, it was there. But you had something there at the show that we'll talk about in a little bit that really made me say, oh man, we've got to do Transformers.
Right.
Yeah. So now, how did you get into Transformers?
Again, it was on TV in the 80s.
So it was more the cartoon than the toy line
G1, and really enjoyed that. And then of course the toys came out, and they were both characters that you could get interacted with or become a fan of on the show.
Absolutely.
But they were also puzzles because you could then transform them from their alt mode of a car, of a truck, a plane, into their robot form.
And the one I always remembered was Blaster and I believe it was Soundwave, the two stereos. I don't know, for whatever reason, I just liked that they turned into stereos instead of cars. You
like the boom boxes.
Like the boom box. That would actually make sense. Yeah. Anyway, so it's just, those were fun. But that actually does make a lot of sense because I've said a few times that that the three big toy lines that I never really got into were Transformers, He-Man, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And it's not that I don't like them, I love them now, but they came out right in the time when I was in high school, and it just wasn't, toys weren't cool and cartoons weren't cool, so I never really watched those when they were on the air. I've seen them kind of as a retrospect kind of thing,
Right.
So, but I do remember the Transformers movie and this guy kind of, we don't like to talk about that, Kill Optimus Prime,
Yep, Hasbro wanted to kill him off to put out the new line of toys. Actually, they killed off a lot of characters.
They did in that movie,
but he was the one that people kind of missed the most.
Well, yeah, he was kind of the key guy, I mean, yeah, they were all important, but,
And I never had, kind of segueing from that, I never had Hot Rod as a kid, and I probably didn't want to have a Hot Rod as a kid because he was the replacement and the cheaper knockoff. But I recently picked one up because I just think it's a cool design. So.
Oh yeah, it is. It is cool driving. It wasn't as bad a knockoff as something called GoBots that we won't mention. Anyway,
exactly.
But you did bring in some toys, and what we've decided to do here is the last thing we're going to show is going to be what I saw at the comic book show. So we decided to go a little kind of bigger, biggest here for Transformers, and this is what we started with.
Optimus Prime. It's from the new Siege line. It's got a longer name, like Transformers War for Cybertron. They have a little bit of battle damage.
They look so much like the '80s ones. They really did a very solid.
Yeah, they know how to get us and pull us in.
Oh yeah. And then they figure the new kids are going to buy it either way. But if we make it look like the old ones, we'll get their parents too.
Oh yeah, they got the 40-year-olds big time locked in. But this is the one actually from the Bumblebee movies. So this is I don't want to say Michael Bay style, but it's the more real world styled Optimus as he would appear in the real world today. But I guess the 80s, the flat-nosed truck. So here's kind of an old school versus the new school.
G1 was a big deal. But you mentioned Bumblebee. So we got to move on to the bigger.
Of course.
And let's just bring that on over if we could. Yeah. Now this is just a monster toy, man.
So
there's a lot of movable parts. We don't want to mess with them too much. Let's turn them around to face the camera. But tell us about this guy.
So this one here is one that doesn't transform, which is kind of sacrilegious to a lot of Transformers fans.
Yeah, he's more of a model. I mean, a statue, I'd say.
Yeah, more of a statue. But he's actually more of an action figure because he has like 60 points of articulation. They're ratcheted. Not all. Some of them are just friction joints. But you can move lots of points. He has ankle pivot.
Yeah.
The head moves. That's fine. And he has even like his little antenna kind of pop up and go down. You can fit batteries in here, but I don't have any in him. But his eyes will light up. His headlights will light up, and it's just a really cool, super movie
he's a great piece, and I mean, I know he's a expensive piece too. He runs, if I'm correct, around like $400, $390, $400.
He was like $390 before shipping, of course, because it's a big box.
Oh yeah. So if you were to go in the store, it's even more. I mean, it'd be more than $390. But it's a great piece, but it does not compare to the third thing, the ultimate toy that we're going to go ahead and take a step outside and look at now. And here is the big one. It's Bumblebee, man. And this is your everyday car.
Everyday car.
And tell us about it. What year, model?
It's a 2011, so it was the year after they came back from being a concept car for the first Transformers movie. They were out of production for a while. And I really wanted the collector's edition one, but that was like $3 extra, and they couldn't find one actually at the dealership.
But you added the pieces on, as you showed me.
Yeah.
So they're all still there.
I added the medallion, which are GM.
Yeah, take us a walk through. Show us the different things that are on here.
So this medallion, I think in the real movie the Camaro would have been removed, but this medallion was an official piece. These little ones were pretty cheap pieces on the rims, the Autobot logo there.
Yeah.
And then actually when you open it up, there's Transformers little, what they call a sill plate. So that's, I thought it was a metal piece when I saw it online, but just like a sticker that goes in there. Then the real model would also have an Autobot logo stitched in yellow on the headrest, as well as I think on the armrest as well.
Excellent. But it's awesome. It's just a super cool car.
Life-size toy, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the ultimate toy, you know, when it comes to toys, man.
Exactly.
All right. Well, it's been great having you on Toy Talk, man.
Thanks, Jack.
All right.
Nice
See
to
you
see
soon.
man.
Transformers, more than meets the eye. Autobots wage their battle to